Daphne, welcome to SHOWstudio. You're here all the time anyway, so. Obviously today is the day that the exhibition is half opening, because it's a private view tonight and then it's open to the public tomorrow. And it's all thanks to you, really, because you saved Isabella's collection from being sold. You saved her clothes from being sold. Tell me why that was so important to you.
I remember the first time I heard about it being sold was Philip called me up and he said, would I bid on a hat? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, Lavinia and Julia were having to sell her clothes to pay the death duties. And I was like, what? That just can't be possible, because that was part of, she was always very, very, that was part of one of her, Anyway, so I said, well, okay, so I called up Julia, who I was close to, and I said, could you just pull the sale, I'll buy it. She said, but you have to see it first. So I said, I'm in New York. She said, you've got to come and see it. So it's very, very adamant. She's incredible, Julia. Thank the Lord for Julia. And so I went to see it, and it was all crushed up in South Ken, and I couldn't look at it. It was all just squished, and it smelt of her, and it was just, and I just said, just tell me what you want, and I'll take it. And I did that, and then I was in the middle of FIT. It was the first. I'd done 1 year, and I was in the middle of that project. So I put it into storage, and didn't know what I was going to do with it. But when they suggested that I do all FIT windows at Barney's, I thought, well, why don't I start dealing with it, put half of Izzy's stuff in the window, and then, brain me, I said, well, we have a window in the middle, and I can change from one to the other. But I did that with executives looking, and it actually happened, and I found myself having to drink half a bottle of tequila to get through that window. It's true. But I knew it was, but it made me get to grips with it, because Savage Beauty was starting to go up. So then I was squished between the two, FIT and that. When FIT opened, I when the plastic came up off the floor, I just made a promise to myself. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but I thought, you know what, if this works, then I'm going to sell my whatever 100 pieces and try to turn it around. I'm so grateful for all the people that believed in me. I mean, like Louise, Valerie, Nick. I mean, it looked like a sort of lunatic, because I was going around with this project, thinking, who's going to, But the good news is that there are 2 students going through Central St Martin's, but it was just outraged that it was going to be split apart, and I did it out of anger, actually. Out of anger and loyalty and stupidity, probably. I mean, but it turns out that it was actually all right, because it's helped people. But because I see all over, during this economic crisis, that all the bankers seem to be. I mean, they cut arts. They're always cutting arts, and people that don't have access to art schools, or they can't afford to go there. It seemed to me that was a very, that would be a very good place to start.
And you mentioned the 2 students that are now going through St Martin's. Because tell me a bit about the Isabella Blow Foundation, because that's the premise. It's giving young people that chance. Opportunity.
Yes. Well, I mean, I know a couple of a few people that are not from London, or they don't have the. It's very different when you're not in a sort of cosmopolitan area to be able to get into the world of art, and you may be singled out for being different or a little, I remember I was when I was little, because I didn't come from a sort of a traditional background, but I can only imagine how much worse it is if you come from, say, the Midwest or from, I don't know, somewhere up, not a sort of place that they would have sort of, say, fashion or art, or, and they, you know, if they're gay or if they've got, if they're slightly different, they get into trouble for it, and it's just not. I find that terrible, and I find it awful that the first thing they cut is the arts. And I think if you can do something, do it.
Tell me, you mentioned before it was so important.
And I thought, and funnily enough, I just thought that would be a very Isabella thing to do.
No, I was going to.
And I was thinking, when I was walking around yesterday, I thought, actually, strangely enough, what I did was what she did with Lee, was she bought his collection for. I wasn't there.
That was his graduate collection, yeah.
And that was all in there, and I thought that really has to be preserved. And I mean, obviously not for me to wear, but. Although Julie was adamant that I should wear something, she kept saying, "You look really good in this." And I'm not sure if I really. I don't think she'd be very happy. And I just think that it's a preservation of something that's sort of flatlined in the sort of 90s, and with the sort of advent of all these sort of huge shows, and a lot of the fun got taken out of it. And I think I've always been outraged on Izzy's part, because she was so good at helping other people, and she neglected herself terribly. I mean, it was, you know, Lee was brilliant with her. I mean, it was a handful of people at Philip, and I'm just so happy that students will be able to see this, because I think it's deeply interesting for them, because I think a lot of people don't understand the connection between a sort of zeitgeist, or they think that it's sort of no, they don't understand that it actually started very, very, at a very sort of, at a level that's not sort of like a brand, you know. No, it's not. It's much more, it is art, and I would disagree with the various editors that I know they say that fashion is not art. Well, I would disagree with that very strongly. I think that it's a manifestation of a tribe, or it's a historical. It's become, you know. But I observe, having gone through the FIT experience and going through this experience, that actually teenagers and younger are more interested in the art of it rather than just having a label.
It's interesting you say tribe, because I think that really comes across. You mentioned, you know, Lee's graduate collection. There's something about that time that Izzy was sort of supporting these young designers, and it is, you mentioned that kind of creative freedom that was there at that time, and I think that spirit of rebellion perhaps you see in her wardrobe, and that's something that would be quite inspirational for students, I think.
Very, very much, and I think that people are. I was asked this question earlier today, and it's sort of like they think it's all about sort of couture or something like that. No, that's not it at all. It's a spirit of individuality. I mean, what's the first thing that goes when you have a dictatorship? Well, they put everybody into a uniform, and in China, for example, I mean, they
stamp out individual spirit.
Chop off people's hair and put them into a, you know. I mean, it's become very difficult to sort of define our times, but it's funnily enough, it was up until that, it was a very sort of, it was almost the last. I mean, there are people now, absolutely, but it's become a whole different thing with the internet, and who knows? I mean, you know, what would have happened to McQueen if she hadn't done that? You know, I mean, he lived on her floor for 2 years, I think, and
Philip lived with her as well.
And then she lived with Philip. I mean, and I wasn't around at that time, but I find it very, very touching, that whole story, and just their whole worlds were sort of blown apart when this happened, and I thought, and I thought it really 99.9% is actually sort of it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It didn't. But I don't like the last things being negative. I like it to be, you know, let's just move on and celebrate.
And celebrate.
Yeah, and that was I didn't imagine that it would be possible, but it was only because of support people like you and Everybody. I mean, because I couldn't have pulled this off on my own. I thought, wow, I was just marching around with my little satchel. Well, I've got this idea.
Well, as you say, it's such a celebration in a sense. You know, it's so lovely to see you mention the story behind it. And I wonder, perhaps this is a difficult question to ask you, but I wonder, what do you think Izzy would have wanted sort of her legacy or her impact on fashion to have been? I don't think
she was at the point where she'd given up. I wish the crash had happened. I wish she'd seen the crash, because she'd have been thrilled. Because she was a real Scorpio. I mean, she was she didn't really understand what was happening. She didn't understand because for her she was very, very involved and very precise about what she did, and she cared deeply about how the shoots that she did were presented. She, if the paper wasn't right or if the typeface wasn't right, and she was, she was getting more and more and more sort of frustrated with what she was given tiny budgets to pull off these things.
And no real time.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at those pictures, I mean, quite frankly, see some of the budgets and you think, and then people are complaining about, she did an incredible job.
And her influence has been
huge, and she was extremely cultured. She was very, very clever, and she was also someone that nurtured people. She wasn't, as Philip says, someone that was just walking around and had to be noticed. She was someone that actually inhabited her whole persona, and she looked like that at the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day it wasn't something that she just put on for a look. It was her, and it came from somewhere, because she was inspired all the time. The funny thing, it's one very funny thing in the show, which we found in a pocket. David LaChapelle remembers going round Arles for 4 days with her. She'd lost one of her heels on a pair of her shoes, right? So she was limping around Arles. So we found the heel in one of the pockets, but we haven't found the shoes. Isn't that? That's just hilarious. One of the sort of, but that's the sort of. She wouldn't dream of not getting dressed. But it wasn't about showing off. It was part of her. It was part of her. It's
very authentic.
Very authentic. She wasn't doing it for any other reason than that she believed in it, and it was she had that sort of spirit of. I can't remember. She wasn't particularly into music, but to me it was always part of music, fashion, because you people dressed in different ways when I was growing up, depending on what music you listened to. But for her, it was really very much an art thing. And she crossed over into the worlds of painting and photography and sculpture, and she nurtured a lot of people in that way. And she was very giving. It's amazing. You can speak to. Oh gosh, you would be surprised the friends she has and the who they are. Oh yeah, very, very, and that's what infuriated me was so. But there we, this I think she would have loved this.
And I guess in a way it goes back to what you were saying.
I'd prefer to have my friends back, but this,
she'd be happy.
yeah, but this she would be happy. Yeah.
And it's not just about, as what you said before, it's not about hats and clothes, it's about that story, it's about nurturing. I guess maybe that's the takeaway from the exhibition.
Yes, it is nurturing, and also she gave a lot of inspiration to the people she worked with. She worked with them very closely, and she was and the sense of history and the sense of where things came from and where you could source things, and and her imagination, which was vivid.
So she'd be happy with the exhibition, do you think?
I think she would be very, very happy with the exhibition. I actually think that I think that the purple light that we see in the book that Nick shot is her turning from blue to purple, and she's going to be very happy. I definitely feel that. I felt it's strange, because there has been a strange something guiding this, because I don't know. It wasn't me. Certainly wasn't.
Daphne, thank you so much.
Not at all. I tell you, I'm just thrilled that people will be able to see this.
It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of work.
Wow. It's thanks to everybody. It's thanks to, thank you, thank you Louise, thank you Somerset House, thank you SHOWstudio, thank you Nick, thank you Amanda. I mean there's just
too many people.
Yeah,
too many
exactly.
parents.
I mean, little old me couldn't do this. It's true.
Thank you, Daphne.
I'm just so happy that it's sad, but it's also it's sad, but now I think it's happy.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember after I did the show in New York, I had little kids coming up to me. They were like tiny little things that come out. They were the ones that got the biggest kick, you know. So I think it's children understand what's real and what's not. If you took a sort of class of 8-year-olds around that, it'd blow their mind. Yeah, I mean, people that are more jaded and think that it's something to do with sort of luxury brands, of course they're gonna have a different view. But children will get it, and they can smell. They know what's right.
They know what's right.
Yeah.
They know what's real.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that for me, that's, you know, if it's all right with an 8-year-old, it's all right with me.
Thank you, Daphne.
Not at all.